Are you gonna? No, hang on. I heard the rustle of a bag now. Is this tuck shop time, Jason Clifford? Are you going to eat all the way through this?
He's eating his mini
eggs. Look, it's my mini eggs.
At school, at school at lunchtime, the dinner ladies would say, "Less talking, more eating." Now, this is the reverse of that situation. Less eating, more talking. And knowing how long your parole clappers took to get round to some a soft mint the other day, you don't want to be putting too many of those mini eggs in.
No, it's very true. I don't. So I will make this my last one before the recording starts.
It's already started, Jason. We've been here half an hour.
Hello and welcome to Talking About Season 11, Part 2. I'm going to fingers to do 11 Part 2. I am P-Bal. Jason, I'm very much surprised that you can stretch your two fingers into that position. Yeah, osteoporosis isn't a kind illness, Jason. It's not a kind illness. Previously, on our last endeavours with Season 11, we scored The Time Warrior, 22, and we scored Invasion of the Dinosaurs, 24. So that is our current season leader. I've already said who I am. I am joined by...
hello, it's James.
And hello, it's Jason.
Lovely to see you. Just that brief moment there, I was thinking, why has he got the chessboard from the Five Doctors? And then I was like, oh, no. It's just the same device Terence had remembered.
There's no hopscotching through this one, though. Or simply just walking through, depending on where you are.
This one wasn't as easy as Pi then.
Yeah. The Life of Pi. Right, no, okay, right. Anyway, the first story that we shall be looking at today is Death to the Daleks. Oh, I can almost hear Kerry Blyton in my ear. I can, and he was actually related to Enid Blyton. It's all facts that we need and love. That's your Canine and Company rendition.
It's the Canine and Company.
No, my Canine and Company is
Canine.
Canine.
Oh
my goodness, any musical thing that comes with it sounds like it's an apology for the Sorry theme tune.
I swear at Utopia we're going to get a copy of that song and just see you on the dance floor going, Canine. Canine.
Well, apologies if anyone is still with us. Who wants to introduce this story?
Go on, Jason, I'll let you go first this time.
Oh, James, how very nice of you. Oh, it was very, very kind there. Okay, Death to the Daleks, a story that I owned on VHS for many, 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 many years, because it was one of the really early ones when it first came out. So, and in omnibus form, of course, when I first watched it. It's probably one of those that is one of those go-to stories for sure. So here we are. They're on the way to Florana, and the TARDIS is drained of all its energy. They land. They don't quite know where they are, which I kind of like in a Doctor Who. And the Daleks aren't far behind, losing their power as well. One of the strangest visuals you'll ever see in a Doctor Who story is Daleks with machine guns using a model TARDIS on a shooting range. Now, how about that for a start of a 10?
I mean, you must hate the Doctor so much to have little model TARDISes just for shooting practice. It's just like, right. Oh,
they might just hate the Met of the 40s, 50s and 60s. Might they might just have a British police hate. It might not be Doctor Who that they're against.
Why did he choose a phone box? If that's not the most unusual thing in this, I mean, the bit where the giant root comes out of the quarry and attacks them as well, that looks like a Hoover attachment.
Not dissimilar to the Eye of Axos, as I recall.
It wasn't on your bedroom wall as well, was it?
No, it wasn't. You're okay this time out.
And yeah, sorry, just whilst we're picking on Jason, you've watched the Death of the Daleks innumerable times, and yet you didn't watch Canine and Company until we did the video review.
No, that's the truth. I never watched Canine and Company.
Oh,
And and I'm the contrary one. I like this notion. Do you know what I mean?
The viewer may change their mind now, I feel.
The video, as I recall, because I had it first as a space adventure in 90 minutes, has that strange cut, doesn't it? It's not because you don't get Commander Stewart getting shot, do you? You don't have the fall exciting thing. I love episode Terry Nation again. He is the king of episode ones, isn't he? He knows how to set the mystery before, the cliffhanger. And episode one is great. And obviously, I don't know if it's quite the highest concentration of location in all of it, because all the route in the pond and all that. There's a lot of film there. But it all looks so good. I mean, it's day for night and all that sort of stuff, but it just looks alien. It looks creepy. I remember talking to Michael Bryant, and he sort of said, well, to people, he said to people, the people like my stories, like, oh my days. I was like, your direction on some of these is so good. I didn't just say on some of these. I said, Colin, it's what you're thinking. It's just that notion that actually he is a really good director, and I love episode one for the location there, and it's so alien and it looks alien. Even the studio bits, the creepy green and shout out to the soundscape, which would have been Dick Mills at this point. It sounds alien and strange, and the sort of bits where you don't quite know if it's an Exelon or if it's a rock.
Yeah, I love the scene in the TARDIS where the TARDIS starts, loses power. That whole sequence where he's like, oh, it's okay, I've got auxiliary power, and he flicks that on, and then it drains, and you really start to feel that it's claustrophobic, with the lights going off, and I think we've talked in previous reviews about how something appears in the TARDIS just for one episode, some piece of equipment. You've got the backup oxygen that just appears as if from nowhere, switches that on, and you just hear the hiss go like this, and then you got the hand crank of the TARDIS. But you're right, when they get out onto the planet, I remember going, that must be an alien. That especially when Sarah's sort of like there, and you see a sort of figure, and you're like, that's one of the aliens, but it's not. But then later on, there is. So it is very good. It's very well shot.
And taking Daleks out onto location in such what I would consider to be a difficult location shoot for any director to take on. That's going some as well, because I think even they are handled really well in the sort of terrain that they're in.
Yeah, and we're back to the kind of Daleks I love, which is sneaky and manipulative and plotting. I always feel that the Daleks are better when it's not like thousands of them in an invasion. It's when they're in a small group and they're up against it, and then you see them manipulate things. They form the pact with the humans, but at the same time they're developing a weapon to try and take control, and they're very scheming and sort of cloak and dagger, which I really like. It's a really good side of the Daleks, and I enjoy watching it when you've got them plotting.
And back in their sort of almost 60s silver livery as well, which I absolutely adored. Although I think the Genesis color scheme is probably the second best color scheme there is next to the silver color scheme, they look really good, and it's really alien as well when you see them having to use the machine gun attachment essentially, because that's the only way that they can exterminate.
Yeah,
just on a rewind back to the sort of early TARDIS bits, and the Doctor Who and the crank handle and all that stuff. I love all that, and the way they actually get the dry ice when the planet comes out through the door and the door opens. And if you haven't had a power cut and used the torch and said "Hurrah for good old fashioned oil," you are not a Doctor Who fan. But the golden moment for Jason, you hadn't watched Kane and Company. We know you're not a real Doctor Who fan. The fact that's amazing that isn't cleared up is that Sarah batters that Exelon to death with she doesn't ask questions. She doesn't check the situation. She batters him to death. So when they do finish their adventure and pop back to the TARDIS to head off to Florana, there's a bludgeoned Exelon waiting for them on the floor of that TARDIS to clean up. Yeah.
And a nice rare TARDIS scene as well, because I think it's, if I'm correct, it's the only time in season 11 we get a TARDIS scene.
It is.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
And you also get a traditional and much loved kind of, should that red light be flashing?
It's always a good starter to a Doctor Who episode, isn't it? Doctor,
But as you say, Terry's the king of the setups, isn't he? That's for sure.
But it's great, though, because the TARDIS has landed somewhere they don't know where it is. They can't use the TARDIS because it's got no power. So they have to take part in the adventure. There isn't that sort of, I mean, it's not every adventure. There isn't that notion that actually they could go, oh, sod this, hop back in the box and be gone. They have to take part in this. They have to see it through. And, you know, we were talking Daleks. The great thing about the Daleks there is that they, without their power, have to sort of form an alliance. And then as soon as they know they can get the upper hand again, they're done with that. And that's great levels of this. And this is, I suppose, their last great hurrah before it becomes the Davros and Dalek show. And it's a shame, really, because this is full-on scheming Daleks, making plans, doing things, not being necessarily like sort of full kind of human-y, but they are, you know, there's scheming and there's levels to them, and they've got plans, and, you know, and that's great. And I think it's just a shame that that's not something that comes back in the show, really. It's
the last Dalek story to feature just the Daleks until Dalek, isn't it? Because Davros is there for the rest of the...
Except for the one guffing around in the death zone. And he hadn't got much of a plan or any semblance of...
Yeah, they ditched the planet of the Daleks version of the Daleks, Jason, you're quite right, to go back to the 60s ones because they didn't like the way they looked on that story. So you know, it's so nice to have that design back and their manipulation back. You know, the thing that I really like about them, and you get, especially when it's put up against someone like is it Galloway, who's sort of like, I can use this to my advantage. You know, he's quite scheming and quite manipulative, and he's sort of telling the Dalek what to do, and the Dalek's like looking at him going, don't think so. You know, there's you have the Exelons and you have the humans and you have the Daleks, and they're all trying to get one up on each other all the way through, and then you add in the Doctor and Sarah Jane to that, and you know, it's an interesting sort of mix of teams, if you like, and you eventually get to see the Doctor and the Exelon go off to the city, but it's they're always trying to double cross each other or try and get one over on each other.
It does feel as though this story's sort of set in those 70s Dalek annuals. You know, you can believe that they're set within that reality because Peter does a reference saying, my father was killed in the last Dalek war. There's the notion of Space Corps and sort of, you know, all that kind of vibe that obviously Terry was keen on setting as the you know, the sort of spin-off and all that. But it's in that universe, isn't it? They're space scientists and military, and they're from Earth sort of going out into the universe, and the Daleks are the, you know, the adversary. So it is that, even down to their little retro sort of tin can spaceship. I love the hubcap spaceship. I mean, the design, it's something they should have another look at again when they come back. Let's have some more hubcaps.
Oh, absolutely. And it's quite nice because they try and give it some sort of epic scale by having it as a background with the Daleks actually coming in and out of it and making it look really quite substantial, that I actually think for its time worked quite well.
But then you have that camera shot of the Doctor and all the sort of like the Space Marines, all in a really tight space because they've got to get that shot in when the Dalek comes out and starts to exterminate them. So you have this big sort of vista for the Daleks approaching, but then they're all in this tiny little thing between two rocks. But it's good.
My favourite reaction ever is just before is Jill's when she sees the spaceship coming into land. She looks, I can't do it. There's a mixture of amusement, elation, and surprise, all in one slightly confused package. And she points into the distance of the studio, pretending that there's a giant spaceship coming into land. I love that. I think that's probably my top 10 Doctor Who moments ever, is Joy Harrison reacting to the spaceship landing with glee.
I mean, you get a real mix and match of sort of cliffhangers though in this one. I mean, because you've got that first one where the Dalek goes to fire, and then you sort of it cuts to the end. But then you've got this, which is just stop, don't move.
Crash zoom on the floor.
Yeah. Which I know, because of timing issues, it wasn't the original point it was going to be ended when the two Daleks came into the previous room, but they were sort of they had to sort of change the timings. But it is such a weird cliffhanger. It's just like, oh, look at the floor. Dun!
Because in some respects, they get the cliffhanger to episode 1 timing quite wrong as well, don't they? Because the Daleks there shooting quite a long time, and there's no ray coming out of it, and it's quite obvious that something's not right already. And then you scream into the sort of the howl around, and off you go for the end of the episode, and it sort of recaps back, but it's cut very quickly back to the fact that they're not going to shoot that gun.
Yeah, it's a bit like Destiny, where you've got the Romana cliffhanger, which is the Dalek smashes through the glass wall, but then talks for another 5 minutes. Just going to exterminate her. It's like, God.
It's just a shame that the resolution in part 4 isn't Bilal going, oh, nasty tiles, and then they keep walking. It would have been the great resolution that we would, we could have been really confused as to why it was a cliffhanger then. What's the other cliffhanger then? Is the other one the root? Is the root coming out, isn't it?
The root is.
It's a double peril because we don't know that Bilal's a goodie, do we? So
no.
Yeah. Well, while we're on Bilal, I mean, actually, Arnold's birthday was the other day. Was this week? Arnold Jarrett's 103.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think definitely 102 or 103. I can't quite remember, but yeah, I mean, what an age.
I love Bilal in this. I love the performance. And again, we've done a lot of People Under Mask discussion we did with time. He's almost like a little I don't know, a little marsupial of some kind, isn't he? He's just got a lovely energy to him that makes him a character, because it would be very easy to be under all of that, because there isn't eyes, there isn't mouth, but he does, and his physicality is great, and he's a sweet little thing, isn't he? You kind of like, oh, please let Bilal make it through this. He's well, actually got a job with them after mining.
He gets on really. I like the dynamic with him and the Doctor. I still think that there's still a bit of frostiness between Pertwee and Liz Sladen in the two characters. They have that scene at the beginning, but then they're pretty much on different trajectories. But he's very protective of him. He's very when they get to the city and they're going through the sort of the different tests. It's almost like he's got the perfect companion in the fact that he can be the smart one. I'm going to show you, I will guide you, I will protect you. Let me show you this. But that Sarah Jane's a little bit more independent and sort of stands up for herself a bit more. So it's almost like he's got a mini companion for this episode, which he feels a lot more comfortable with.
I think there's that, because there is that notion that when they bring Jo Grant in, the Doctor says you just need someone to nod and say how wonderful you are and pass your test. And Jo Grant is very that isn't what she does, but she's very sort of respect, and she's always like, oh, this is amazing, or what's this? Whereas Sarah's got a sort of a line in sort of withering, cheeky sarcasm. That works well with the Fourth Doctor because he's so sort of ethereal and alien that it bounces off, and his humour reacts well to that. Whereas Pertwee's a bit more straight, I think, and so it does create a friction there because they come out of the TARDIS and she goes, "Do you mean this isn't the air that's like a magic potion or something?" And he gets a bit huffy, and it's the dynamic there, and I don't think it would have been a great thing rolling onwards because but for the Fourth Doctor and Sarah Jane, that's sort of the defining thing, and it works really well. But obviously, like you said, you don't get a lot of Doctor Who and Sarah Jane together in this one. They're split up quite early doors, which is the traditional narrative of a Doctor Who, isn't it? Split them up, let them have their adventures separately, and then bring them back together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
agree. And I remember Belial being one of the characters on the Weetabix cards that you got with the Weetabix sets in the around about 1975, I think. And obviously, I'd not seen Death of the Daleks then, but you had Belial, and you had some really random characters on those Weetabix cards, didn't you?
Yeah, Vega Nexus was on one of them, wasn't he?
Yes, but it was such a small part. Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. But it was such a small part. But there really was some random monsters on those sets.
Yeah, John Avenari gets a little bit of a short thrift of this. I think it's a shame he's not in it a bit longer because he's a good actor, and it's what it is. But it's a shame because he's good. I like all the crew actually. They're a mixed bunch, but they all, you know, they're all very defined with their characters, I think.
And this story sort of feels like it's carrying on the tradition of this season because actually there's not been a bad story so far throughout this whole season that hasn't had a really strong guest artists cast list set aside against it.
No, it's. I think we're still in slight post trauma from season 20. So having a run of more than one story that we can enjoy is probably just shell shocking us slightly.
Yeah, I'm possibly feeling a bit guilty that I'm going to go for a third story that I've really enjoyed.
What do you think of the design of the city? It's got a Lego-y vibe, hasn't it? But do we like the design of the city?
When the beacon goes and you get that noise as well. I mean, I love the soundtrack to this. It's suitably creepy and bizarre. But you're right. When it flashes, you're like, oh, there's someone's just made something at school. You know, they've just said, right, we need an excellent city. Go in your class, see if you've got any craft supplies. Because it's one of those, isn't it like one of those polystyrene melt things as well? It's just like
at the end when it does melt and you hear the screaming, I think that's actually surprisingly effective, isn't it?
That's really quite spooky and scary. You're talking about one of the 700 wonders of the world here.
Well, you know? there are only 699 now.
It feels more like a Sarah Jane line than a Doctor Who one, doesn't it? Really, it's a little bit more sarcastic. If you say, "Oh, that was on the 700 of the world," she blew out 699 now. Giving her a withering glance. Then the end music.
I think she's straight on TripAdvisor going, "Wow, I didn't make much of this."
And I think even the studio work for the city works really well because you've got those wonderfully designed like symbols and things that you've got to work out the puzzles to get you through into the different areas. And I think it is a bit like an early Five Doctors to a degree, but I think the city's well designed. Even for a studio set, it feels kind of a little bit claustrophobic and a bit like it, you know, it's a bit alien even though it is just a series of white walls at times.
I mean, the weird thing is, because I know people always say Doctor Who quarry looks, you know, Doctor Who quarry, Alien was a quarry. I think it just looks like everything about this has a, sort of that alien vibe. I love. We've had Belal's the actual Excellence themselves with their sort of eyes and all. They look like a genuine alien race. It's all really well executed. I think the aesthetics of the city and the contrast between the sort of primitive Exelons and all the incense and the sacrifice bits. It's just it's a beautiful contrast. And the all the different sets and the sort of styling on this.
When they're in the underground tunnels and they just go into there's a secret passage, and because they're the same color as the walls, they kind of just blend in, as they're escaping. It's really nicely done. I think you're right. I think it does look really good. I think the chanting sounds a bit like the master and his in the daemons. They're chanting in the church. It sounds a bit like that. But it's really atmospheric as well.
Great mask design again by John Freelander, really. I mean, again, he always delivers every time there's a demand. But think about it, though, back then, alien stories set on alien planets were few and far between still at this stage. So this is only the first time this season. You've got to go back to Planet of the Daleks, possibly in the previous season. So it's kind of nice that they can experiment and explore a little bit here for the first time this season.
So I know I said I like Kerry Blyton's music. I genuinely do. I think what is that instrument? I should have looked at it before we started, because we used to have it at school where you scraped it up and it made that noise.
Yeah.
Yeah, the wooden scrapey thing. I think it really suits the vibers. I'm not saying that Dudley wouldn't have done a good job, because Dudley obviously marvelous, but I think it's an unusual sound, and I think that suits this.
It's
quite lucky we haven't got someone just with a triangle at the end. Someone does that, and then you hear this ting.
But it's quite a unique sound, isn't it? I think, and it's not like anything we'd previously heard on Doctor Who.
And it's creepy. When they're sort of stumbling around the quarry at sort of twilight, it's either first thing in the morning or last thing at night, and you hear that crunk, crunk, crunk. It is creepy. It's like I say, it's very atmospheric.
I'm resisting doing the music again, by the way.
That's because you only do synthesized sounds. Like that.
Coming soon at Christmas. Jason's 20 top 10 hits that all sound like K9.
One thing that I also find actually, and it always even annoyed me as a little Bal, is that the TV's Doctor, when they come out of the TARDIS at the start, and she's obviously wearing the bikini, and it's like it's too cold, go and get changed, lovely. She goes in and she's hesitant and comes back, says, you won't go away, will you? He's like, no. First thing he does is bugger off. What is that?
I know.
You've even come back to specifically say, do not leave me on my own in the dark on a creepy planet. He's off with the lamp. He's off with the lamp.
Yeah. And then, that horrible nightmare situation where she walks out, he's gone. There's the lamp covered in blood. It's like, oh, great.
So yes, TV's Doctor Who, not a friend there, is he? He's not a good guy.
No.
I also love the it's all coming back to me. I also love the rock as well. I love the sequels to the rock. I mean, it's a slightly polystyrene rock. They weren't going to drop a real boulder on Mr. Pertwee, were they? Obviously, but I love all that kind of. Again, that's very sort of alien world. And,
It's okay. It would have been Terry Walsh in the firing line for it, surely.
Yeah.
You mean Mr. Pertwee had a stunt double?
Oh, I'm sure we'll talk about Mr. Walsh more in subsequent stories. Because John had got really bad back pain by this point, hadn't he? He was really struggling.
His hair was getting bigger because of Katie telling him he'd gone bald. So, I mean, he got diverse problems, hadn't he, going on? I do think the Extons are slightly like the Sandmen in Star Wars, aren't they? So I think there's a sort of that's always reminiscent, like when they've got him captured and he has to deck them.
No, exactly.
So anyway,
I know what you mean.
Do we have any exciting, real or otherwise facts about Death of the Daleks?
We've covered some of them actually whilst we've been going through. So you mentioned earlier on the 90-minute sort of edit of this. So this is one of only 2 of the Third Doctor stories to still exist in the 90-minute PAL studio recording. The other one is Claws of Axos. The original story didn't actually have the Daleks in at all. They didn't plan to have the Daleks in. It was added because of the Daleks' popularity. Letts and Dix wanted to put the Daleks into this, but Robert Holmes wasn't a great fan of the Daleks, and he was shadowing Dix. And there's a speculation that that's why we get Death to the Daleks, because he didn't really like them. It's just like, kill the Daleks. But originally, in one of the early drafts, the Daleks actually got away. They weren't blown up by Galloway. They actually escaped, and then the humans helped the Exelons, and sort of got hold of their whatever it's called. Is it
Perineum?
Perineum.
It's as common as salt on that planet. As common as salt.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I say, the 60s, they'd gone back to the 60s Daleks because they didn't like the Planet of the Daleks casings. They thought they looked odd.
And they go back to that for the next one, don't they? The Genesis cases are literally...
They are the same colour when you get back to Genesis as they were in Planet. They're back to gunmetal grey.
I mean, B&M must be thrilled that there's a divert because it gives them another figure set to knock out. But it is an odd thing that they only tickle with this and then go back to the it's a very sort of glossy paint on them, isn't it? In the studio, you can see that it's a black gloss paint finish on them.
But you do wonder if because there's the scene where the Dalek is killed by the root and things like that. You wonder whether they trashed some of the remaining ones, and so just had to go back to the Planet of the Dalek ones. But, I mean,
that's one of the icon. I mean, there's a couple. The Exons can batter the cack out of the Dalek. That is the iconic image, though, isn't it? The Dalek on fire. I mean, it's great, and it is properly on fire, isn't it? You won't want to be too close to that in your Exelon garb. But you also get. Talking about the root, because I know it's a slightly. I think you either get on board with the root or you don't. But I think that the root in the clay pit scene's quite good, and the Dalek is great, and the poor old Exelon that catches fire and all that sort of stuff. I think that's all. James has been a fan of the root, are you?
I love the root. I think the root. I mean, it does, like I say, look like a Hoover attachment, but I love the way it comes out of the water and attacks them. I love the shot you get as well, where you see it from the Dalek's perspective. When it's being beaten up and you just see all the Exelons around it. Again, there's so much in this which is designed to build on the atmosphere, is designed to give you a slightly different viewpoint. There's lots of little nice touches that I like about this story.
There's a moment with the eye stalk. The Dalek looks at the one, looks at the other, then he looks down. It almost feels like he needs to go, oh shit. There's a sort of unspoken, oh God. I mean, the root thing isn't far off that thing in the Crotons, is it? That comes out from
no, it's not. That's right.
I reckon they found it in the cupboard. It's good.
I found some old Daleks from the 60s. Found that as well. Let's use those.
Oil lamp from Evil of the Daleks. They couldn't get out of the store cupboard, could they?
Oh, it's like an early dry run for the 20th anniversary season again.
Dry run for the 60th. Anyway, are we heading towards a score?
Yes, go on, I'll go. Look, I can see Jason's face going. Is he going to go first? Is he going to go first? I'll go first. Do you know what? You're right. This was out on VHS. It was one of the first ones. It was Death to the Daleks. I think there was Day of the Daleks was out quite early on as well. So I remember watching both of those quite often. I used to watch this and go, oh, it's a Dalek story, it's all right. But I must admit that it's something that over the years has grown on me, and I love the Daleks in this. I think they're really sneaky. And continues the trend in this season so far of quite enjoyable episodes, I have to say. So I scored this 8.5.
Oh, he's the first to go fractional. He's the first to go fractional.
I wish you could see Jason's face right now.
Always serene.
That's not the face you had a moment ago.
Okay, so you've gone 8.5 then, James, have you?
No, here comes Jason's 9.
No, never would do it. To be honest, James, you're absolutely right. We're on the third story of season 11, and every story so far has had something different, something really unique about it. And it's actually turning into a bit of a monster season as we come along as well, because of course we've had the Sontarans already, we've had dinosaurs, now we've got the Daleks. So there's something for everybody as we come through it. But specifically in this story, I think it's well directed. It's good at 4 episodes. And I think, this story is very tight, works really well. It's a story that's been there for me for a very long time. And I've sat and watched it countless times, probably in the 90-minute edit more than I have in the episodic versions. John and Liz, I think, are on good form. I know that you said earlier, James, you feel still a little bit spiky, but actually, I think they're getting along really well at this stage. They're hitting their stride. Great guest list in this one. You can never go wrong with a Dalek in a story either. So, I'm sorry, James, but you trumped me on that score. But I was also going to be giving Death to the Daleks 8.5.
I thought you were going to say then, so I'm going to give it a 9.
It's all very tense. It's all very exciting. I give it a 2. No, right. I didn't. I mean, I could have left that hanging there, and there could have been just left that moment of doubt where you're like, oh God, he means it.
We'd have had to have got #Justice4 going again here. You know that, don't you?
Doctor and the Exiles. It's one of the. It is one of those that. I mean, I used to watch this, and I would still watch Kanan and Company. But it is. Do you know what I mean? It's one of these things that that's my Jerry Hello. Do you know what I mean? It's one of these things that I don't think Doctor Who in the Death to the Daleks is the greatest Doctor Who story. If you were going to look for the greatest Doctor Who story from anything, but in terms of my preference on enjoying Doctor Who and the Death of the Daleks, it's one that I could still go and watch tomorrow. It is a bit like Revenge of the Cybermen. I know we got a little bit of people going, "Ooh, Revenge of the Cybermen, really?" But it's the same director, same composer. It is very much just one of those stories that you can just put on it, blast through at a good pace. There's lots to watch, lots to enjoy, and so. I didn't bother with the fractionals, and I gave it 9.
Ooh. Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was just waiting because I'll be doing the live chat, and when you said 2, I was going to sat there watching all the comments come up. 2?
It won't be the first number 2 on one of these. It gives Death to the Daleks or Doctor Who and the Exilons, depending on what you want to call it. And a variety of X's there as well. 26 points. They're stunned into silence.
The season's just getting better and better, isn't it?
Well, I'd say it's incrementally getting 2 points extra per story each time, which means if the Monster of Peladon gets 28, that would mean that Planet of the Spiders will get 30, and each story will have gone up by 2 points. Do we think that's actually going to happen, though?
No.
Because the next stop, we are, sadly, dear viewer, we're not going to take our divert onto Doctor Who and the Ghosts of N Space, which would happen at this point. And James has spent like £100 getting the vinyl to not listen to.
And that would almost be quite a shock to me because I haven't prepared for it.
Or the Peter Howell music and the Doctor Who and the Ghosts of N Space. No. Anyway, we are moving on to the next story, which is The Monster of Peladon. Jason still didn't look sure that that was the next story. It is the next story.
He was checking his notes, wasn't he? He was like, what's happening?
It's like, oh no, I thought it was the curse. I thought Joe Grant was back.
I saw him sort of lifting his notes up like that. I thought he was trying to sneak another mini egg, while we were talking.
No, I'm not going to do that.
So, who is introducing Doctor Who in The Monster of Peladon? It struck me actually before that. It struck me it's quite strange because we haven't actually reviewed The Curse of Peladon, so we're doing the sequel before the original. Anyway, we move on.
We haven't, have we?
No, we haven't. It's bizarre, isn't it? So, who's introducing this 6-part stunner?
Well, I was going to say we are back on Peladon, even though this is the first time we have moved to Peladon, 50 years after the Doctor's last visit. But has Agador really returned? Yeah. So, what can I say about Monster of Peladon? The scores for this season have got progressively better. No pressure on this story, but for me, it's like suddenly we've got a bit bogged down in the sort of goings on with the Galactic Federation and Galaxy 5 and miners. And I know we've not reviewed the first part, the first story on Peladon. This was supposed to be a sequel, but really it's just a continuation of many of the themes that were picked up in the first one. So much so that they got a lot of the elements back for this story. So they got some of the sets, they got some, the team that produced the first story. And so although it's set 50 years later, the king has gone, his daughter is the queen, we've still got Alpha Centauri, we've still got a couple of the other sort of cast referenced. But it does, for me, I think it suffers a bit that it's too similar to the first one. It's like, yes, it's 50 years later, but we're talking about the same kind of themes. In the first one, it was about joining the Federation and what impact that was going to have on them. Now they're in the Federation, they're at war, the miners are trying to, it's all very 70s political sort of quagmire. The miners,
it's not far off the current political quagmire, though, is it? To be fair.
Energy prices were going through the roof. There was pies at the palace. No, don't get me started. But it I don't know. I think it suffers because the first one covered some of the same issues, and it feels like, yeah, great, you've gone back 50 years later and they're still having very similar issues. What was the benefit of the first visit? Does that make sense?
It does, and I think it's actually a shame we're not reviewing Curse of Peladon here, because that would be a great story to be reviewing. It's quite odd that we're doing Monster of Peladon first of all. Both the Peladon stories are actually stories that I've watched a few times over the years, and I think there's always going to be a slight preference towards Curse of Peladon. As you know, I'm a bigger fan of 4-part stories than I am 6-part stories. And if ever you want an example of how a 6-part story can be terribly saggy, this is a great example of how a 6-part story can be terribly saggy, because it is. You're right, James. They're able to rob the scenery store and get the sets back out again. They can bring back all the sort of familiar faces, Alpha Centauri, the Ice Warriors, of course, and set it 50 years in the future. And realistically, it's almost feels like it is just a retelling of the original story. And it feels a little bit like this is where they run out of ideas at this point during the season, because it isn't terribly good. It plays too heavily on its political aims. And that's a feature in this season, because obviously Malcolm Hulke had written something that was a fairly political hot potato anyway in the sort of environment, the green thing that was going on in Dinosaur Invasion. But that's a great example on how to write political. And then you get a great example of how not to. And I'm afraid Brown Hills didn't quite get it on point here. However, great to see the Ice Warriors back again. And I love Color Ice Warriors because, you know, they really are a great monster villain to have. And in this instance, they are indeed monster villains because they are trying to do the Federation down as part of the storyline. So, yeah, not the highlight of the season, but one that's still enjoyable enough to watch through, I think.
I think the problem, I mean, Doctor Who's always political, isn't it? There's always a shade of it. I think the problem falls with this is it feels a little bit like it treads water to the point where the Ice Warriors come in, and then all of a sudden the pace picks up. I mean, Alan Bennion is incredible. I think he's, you know, I mean, you're only seeing his mouth and his voice, but he's incredible and so convincing. And he's brutal, isn't he? He's like, you know, I'm judge, jury, execution, all that. So and then the soft, you know, only if I have to be, I'm a bad guy. And there's, you know, he's great in this. And obviously, sad shout out because obviously Sonny Caldinez is in this, and you know, we've worked with Sonny quite a few times. Lovely chap. So good to give him a little mention there. But the Ice Warriors are the stars of this, really. So I think you kind of, I love that they're now the bad guys back in because it's the twist and curse that they're the good guys, and that's different, and that then they're back to being bad because that's kind of, you know, it's where you're at, isn't it? But it's just that kind of getting to that point where they reveal, and again, it's quite nice that they're there the whole time and that they work out that, well, they couldn't have landed and they must have been in the refinery. They must have been the silhouetted shape of an ice warrior in the window. That must have been an ice warrior and all that sort of stuff. But you do have to have about 14 attempts of Sarah Jane crying because she thinks Doctor Who's dead at the slightest thing. I mean, her insurance company must have been like, hello, Miss Smith. Doctor Who's dead again. Can I put an insurance claim? Like, have you actually seen the body? Have you been to the... No. You've just seen it on a video screen again. Do you want to check the body? Because I think you're going to have a little shock here. You're going to have a shock. He's not going to be dead. And it makes her into a strangely wet character, which is a shame because she's been very strong in the previous stories. And now she comes into this kind of, oh, Doctor Who's dead. Why can I... He's alive. And it's like, oh, again? I've stunned you into silence on it.
No, I entirely agree with you. Again, I don't want to sound like a broken record. The Pertwee and Sladen relationship, it never seems to quite get there. I think possibly in the last story, it's maybe the best of this season, and her character changes, like you say. You know, she's gone from the first episode where she thought the Doctor was the one that was causing all the scientists to disappear to suddenly becoming really weepy over the Doctor, and it almost feels like they wrote the part not necessarily knowing who was going to be playing the companion. It's almost like it was like, right, insert companion here. Whereas Sarah's had, you know, a few stories where she's had some really strong moments where she's gone off on her own. She's found the conspiracy, like you say, in dinosaurs, and all of those things. And then suddenly she's sort of reduced a bit in this story. And I think this story, for me, it suffers. Whereas Invasion actually works as a six-parter because you've got sort of like the first three-parter, if you like, then you've got the bit involving the spaceship that isn't a spaceship, but you know, you get the next part of the story and you get layers to it and you discover that there's a conspiracy going on. In this, yes, the Ice Warriors add to it, but it's a drudge. It's like, oh my God, I know at some point it's going to pick up again, but it almost needs to be another story going on, or something just to give it that lift to when the Ice Warriors are kind of revealed. but it does feel like they've just got the blueprint from the first episode and gone, can we make it a little bit longer? We've got a bit of a gap to fill before Jon's finale. Let's pad this out and have it with a different twist. And it doesn't really sit well for me with the other stories that have happened so far, which are really good.
You can see why Philip Hinchcliffe would be like, oh, 6-part stories. It's not because it's like you say, it isn't like this is a 4-part story and the 2-part. It's not. There's a 4-part story with the political Peladon thing, and then the Ice Warrior thing. It's sort of the same thing. It sounds like I'm supposed to hate this. Actually, I don't mind this as a story. I don't hate it. I don't love it. It's just it's a slog. And I know, and before anyone puts it in the comments below, I know you were meant to watch this over a month and a half. I mean, God bless people sticking with this for a month and a half. But it's. I mean, you couldn't have an unedited VHS omnibus, could you? I mean, people would be dropping.
No, you couldn't.
And there's also that cringeworthy bit as well. And I know it's done with the best of intentions, I suppose, where TV's Doctor Who goes, Sarah Jane Smith, you might want to talk to Queen Thalera about women's liberation. I'll leave you girls to it. And it's like, and yeah, Queen Thalera is just wet, isn't she? There isn't a sort of layer to that part where it's like she wants to be a strong ruler and she doesn't really know how to assert her. She just feels a bit kind of like.
To paraphrase one of our recent reviews, you're just shoehorning in feminism this time. It's just like, here's something just to talk about. Get away from all the political drudge. Let's talk about feminism for a little bit.
Alpha Centauri's Doctor Who's first hermaphrodite.
Yeah.
Back for a second showing. That's diverse.
Yes.
I love Alpha Centauri. I love that. It's a shame. I know we had the brief wave on the Monitor and Empress of Mars, but it's a shame because it's a character that I think you could. It doesn't have to even be the same Alpha Centauri because you presume it's not the only one of its race. It's a sweet little thing, I think, and there's sort of humour to it, and there's a lovely little interplay, isn't there, where Sarah recoils, doesn't she? Because she's a bit scared, and then she's instantly regrets it, and it's a really nice interplay between Liz and someone in a giant sort of willy with a curtain around it. To make that believable and empathetic, it's just incredible. So.
Did get a costume upgrade though. This story out got that lovely fancy new green cloak, not the cloak that was seen in the Curse of Peladon.
Someone had taken that home for their living room, hadn't they?
Yeah, John's got it hanging in the living room.
Was like, anything left on set? Oh, I'll have the curtain. Keep the head. I'll have the curtain. I noticed there was a cheeky flash of Nick Hobbs' ankle when Agador gets killed at the end as well.
Oh, that's quite sad, though, that Agador didn't quite make it through this story, I think.
Yeah, I like Doctor Who's reaction to he just sort of throws Eccleston to one side and it's like, oh, sad news, Agador's gone. That sort of shades of the Sixth Doctor, isn't it, in some ways? Donald G gives a strange performance in this, though, doesn't he?
Yeah, I was just going to say that. It is a very odd performance because obviously you're led to believe he's the goodie up until the point where it's becoming very, very obvious he's not the goodie. But yeah, I mean, obviously he'd been in the Space Pirates previously and he crops up in this one, but you're right, it is an odd performance throughout, I think. And
there's an odd twist at the episode, the odd twist where he turns to him and goes, I shall be ruler of Earth. It's like, that's okay. You're on Peladon, mate. I don't. It just seems a bit of a. I don't know. It's like a sort of throwaway invasion plan kind of thing, and it's just like it just doesn't. But Dudley gives it a little musical riff just to emphasise it as well, which doesn't help.
And I think as well with this story, it's all studio bound as well. And I mean, I know Curse of Peladon was also studio bound, but it had 2 episodes less, so perhaps not as much of a directorial challenge as this one was. But, there's a little bit of film and there's a little bit of studio, but it is all pretty much just done indoors. and it's just caves or castle, and it's a bit bland from that respect as well, isn't it? From a sort of a planet vista, it is not, I think, on Peladon.
And then by the time we were at this point, John's back was so bad that Terry Walsh was like in for almost anything that was physical. And there's the fight sequence where you can tell it's very clearly not John. But they dubbed John's voice over the top of it to try and make you think that it was John. So rather than have the sequence, they actually recorded John saying some dialogue over the top of the fight sequence to try and give the illusion that it was him, but it was quite clearly not by this point.
I'm still optimistic that in a 1970s television screen, you wouldn't have had too much of an idea. It's a bit like when you see the Hoover coming out of the water in Death of the Daleks. You can see the black cables quite prodigiously swinging about. I'd just like to think that it wouldn't have been as awful as it is now on our ultra high crystal 17-foot televisions. I mean, kind. But yeah, it's interesting because even sort of down to the action scene, I don't know. I would love, and someone must have done this. Doctor Who fans have done everything. Someone must have edited this into 4 parts. Because I think if it were 4 parts, even, I think it'd be a much better thing. I think it's not necessarily the product. It's not the product. It's the length that's a problem.
Yeah. Because I don't think it's the director's that's not quite delivered here either. Because Lenny Main's got a good pedigree for Doctor Who stories, and I just think it probably is it's trying to be. It's a 4-part stretch to 6, isn't it? That's the reality of it.
That's essentially the feel of it. Yeah.
What about Vega Nexus then? Well, he's one because it's funny because they've gone to the effort of their sort of Narnia costume for him. They're Mr. Tumnus, isn't it? And I like that they've drilled his eye holes. I don't know whether Gerald Taylor have got one eye looking for you and one eye looking at you, but they've drilled those eye holes at a very strange angle for him, and he sort of has to stand proudly to kind of do the look, doesn't he?
And it is a little bit of a blink and you'll miss it performance, really, isn't it?
Do we need a hashtag justice for Vega Nexus? I mean, he could come back.
He got his own Weetabix card. He was famous. He had his own Weetabix card. What can I say?
Did you play with Vega Nexus often?
Oh, often, yes.
Oh, all under the shadow of the Axon Eye.
Yeah. Well, now we know the Axon Eye one side, the root to the other side. No, I'm not even going to do. No,
don't even do it.
No, I'm not going to do it. Not going to do it. That'd be the caption that Doctor Who magazine would use as a screen cap, wouldn't it? You know what they use? Yeah, because one of the magic things I think about Curse of Peladon, which we're not discussing now, is the different alien delegates and that sort of the variety of different alien creatures, and that's sort of missing from this. So I suppose it is kind of pseudo historical, isn't it? Because it's just people in kind of vague medieval costumes. I don't know, and Ortron's a sort of retread, isn't he? He's the same as Hepesh was, so it's more of what we had before, but longer and not quite as good. I mean, Nina Thomas or David Troughton. I mean, I'm not being a bitch here, but I mean, there's different levels there, aren't there? And even down to Peladon has that the quasi-romantic thing that Peladon may or may not fancy Joe or whatever, the Princess Josephine and all that sort. It doesn't even have that sort of bubbling layer in this. There isn't a sort of. It's not split enough up, or there's not enough happening to justify the length.
And this is where you've got the opportunity to flesh out these characters, and it just doesn't really happen.
I mean, even if they'd have divided it and just had maybe Doctor Who was at the palace and he was in the political part there, and Sarah had gone out to a family that was, the mining family, and she was getting their side. You just divided the story up slightly like that, but they're all sort of going around the same locations, aren't they? There's not a big split on that either. They do seem to go around that corridor outside the throne room with alarming regularity, don't they? And
I do love the way they are so... it eats up time, which is great, but every time they have to open one of those doors in the secret passages, they unhook the lamp, then they hook the lamp back up again, and it's done religiously every single time. It adds minutes to the whole story.
Jon probably had to be very careful with his booth, though. Flame and booth. Could Terry do this bit? Could Terry lift the flaming torch off for me? I'm not sure my arm can...
I need a stunt wig.
I mean, at this point, James, by the way you've described it, anything with Jon walking was Terry Walsh in disguise.
It probably was. At this point. I mean, his back was really bad. I mean, the booth one's not quite got to whodunit size yet, but it's on its way.
We get there in the next story. That booth is really going for it in the final story.
I mean, I like Ralph Watson's crazy turn. He does the psycho well. Rex Robinson does one of my favorite Doctor Who lines. He does the, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the mine. It's a great one. So he's, again, if you've not said that to a Doctor Who fan, you've said, we've got an old saying on Peladon, if you can't stand the heat, get out the mine. Maybe my quotes aren't universally used by everyone. What? That should be a T-shirt. We'll message Clayton, and we'll get that as a T-shirt.
It'll be on Redbubble next week.
Do we have any facts, true or otherwise, on Doctor Who and the Monster of Peladon?
Yeah, there's a couple. So I think we mentioned that this is the last story that was written by Brian Hales. It was originally going to be called Return to Peladon. By the way, we're going back to Peladon. Yay. Ralph Watson was temporarily blinded when the sonic lance blew up. There was the bang went off too quickly, or whatever it was, when he was temporarily blinded by the flash. We talked about Alpha Centauri, where you can see the feet at one point. It was the last official TV appearance of the Ice Warriors for 39 years, and they might have been clips or snippets of them, but the last one until the modern Who. We talked about Sonny sadly passing away this year. Donald G passed away in January as well, so it's quite sad. As I say, many of the original Peladon production props and costumes were used, and it was the 1960s Ice Warrior outfits as well. So a bit more of the recycling than we saw in the last episode.
Including the big head one, the one that's got the massive big head that's as big as its shoulders.
He skulks in the background, doesn't he, the big head one?
It is.
He's good friends with the Dalek in Death of the Daleks that hasn't gone operator, that also skulks at the back. just not moving.
Our Sonny's a loss, though. It is sad news.
Frances Pigeon is in this as well as uncredited handmaiden, I think, is Lenny Main's wife.
Yeah, she's the knowing lady that stood next to Queen Thalira. The whole time going, do you know what, darling, if you're going to cast me in this, could you not get me something with lines?
Yeah.
True. Just get his lines in the Hand of Fear, it's fine.
It does. That's it. My facts.
Feel free, everyone, to look in actual Doctor Who books and check whether any of that's true.
Hashtag Dark Web Alert.
Hashtag less reliable than Haining.
He'll be telling us next. He'll be telling us next that the Gunfighters was the lowest rated story of all time.
I'm going to do a little bit of merch myself. Look, I've got the Doctor Who book of lists that I've been reading. You can't see it.
We can't see it.
You can see
I don't know whether you've been looking through Adrian Rigglesford's notes.
He's got the 70s book out, hasn't he, for this?
Oh, he's got the 60s book out and it's all confused. So, ironically, we've actually, we listened to the soundtrack of this. I think it probably works better on audio than just watching it. Anyway, do we have scores of Doctor Who and the return to Peladon?
Yes, we do, and I'll make a start off here. Obviously, not wanting to be copying anybody with their scores here in any way. No, I'm kidding. Okay, Monster of Peladon, we're back. What you can't see is the faces that they're pulling to try and distract me from giving my always unique take on the episodes. Okay, so coming back to Peladon, on paper, it probably seemed like a good idea. In reality, it lacked a little bit of an idea, to be honest with you. And I'm afraid at 6 episodes, it was a little bit too long. Nice to go back and re-explore. Nice to see the Ice Warriors again. Particularly the Ice Lord. I do think Alan Bennion's performance, as always, was top draw. John and Liz coming up to the end of it now, really, I suppose, for us. We've only got one more story left. But it lacks a story. And it's a couple of episodes too long. So on that basis, I'm going to give the Monster of Peladon a 4, because that's how many episodes I think it should have been.
Oh, did you see? He went 5 and then just went, I'm going to be extra stingy and I'm going to go 4.
He's trying to use his Doris Stokes skills. Go, what's James scored? What's James scored? What's James scored? And must be within half. Must be within half.
It's not though. So he was trying to second guess me. So it's a shame because the 3 stories before this are really good, engaging. They're interesting. That some of the plot twists and things like that, that happen in the previous stories, really good. Here, it does feel like you're treading very familiar ground, and to extend it to 6 episodes, but not to really add much different to it, then almost needed to be like something different, like you were saying, send Sarah off to investigate something while the Doctor deals with something else. I still feel that the dynamic is a bit weird as well with Pertwee and Liz, and it's nothing against them. I just think that Pertwee's obviously thinking, I've got one more story and I'm out and I'm in a lot of pain and I just want to get through this. It's not the worst story in the world, but it is very pedestrian, and so I did score it 5.
It's tense. Jason hadn't got any reaction to that, so I don't know if he's switched off.
No. I'm waiting with bated breath for your score on this one, P-Bal.
Oh, well, you don't have long to wait because I'm going to do it now. Yeah, I mean, Monster of Peladon, if you've got a Doctor Who friend that comes around to visit you and you kind of want them to leave, put this on, they'll get bored, and then by the time they've gone, the Ice Warriors will turn up and you can have the good part of the story. It's a savvy tip for you. That means if anyone that does, I mean, if anyone ever visited, but if I didn't put Monster of Peladon on, they'd know my canny scheme. Anyway, it's for me, it's bobbling on the average mark. I don't think it's terrible. I think there's enough going on within it, but it's all right to me. So, Looking Alive, I gave it 5.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, we have basically just roasted it for the last I don't know how long, but it's not. Again, it's just not so utterly dreadful that I would demolish it. But
it's certainly lifted by having the Ice Warriors back and make it, and it's actually really good turn for them really as well. And I think that the menace is back, which, although we've not reviewed Curse, wasn't quite there in the Curse of Peladon. So it was kind of nice to see them back to that sort of old sinister selves. So there are some things to lift it, but it's just 2 episodes too long, frankly.
The sad thing is, because I know Planet of Spiders has got the bank holiday omnibus where it's 70 minutes, isn't it? If they'd have given that treatment to the Monster of Peladon, imagine the alternative that we could have where it was 70 minutes long and the chop they could have taken out of that. And it would, I don't know, do it. One of you enterprising folks with the technology, have a go. Send it over. We'll have to watch.
Blu-ray, is it? Yeah. You could have it normally they extend it for the Blu-ray. Maybe they'll cut it for the Blu-ray.
to 2 14-minute episodes, because as we know, 14 minutes is the optimum length for a classic Doctor Who episode.
14, did you say, or 40?
14 dimensions in time, you mad old
I was
tart.
waiting for the dimensions in time reference.
I mean, you can't make it into 3D. I mean, that's stealing the USP from Dimensions in Time. But I mean, I think 14 minutes. If you could do Monster of Peladon in 2 14-minute episodes, imagine how pacey it would be.
Guys, we were almost at 14 minutes for the recent Sea Devil story, weren't we?
She wants to be cancelled in 2022, doesn't she?
He does.
Right. Well, we got one more story to go, which is going to be following in part 3. But as it stands, our season leader is A Death to the Daleks on 26, followed by Invasion of the Dinosaurs 24, Time Warrior 22, and Monster of Peladon 14, which would probably have made like second place in season 20. But we'll step aside from that. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Pleasure as always.
It's like there's a time delay, but I know they're not in different countries. I mean, Jason's obviously in a foreign land, but I mean,
Jason's in Wales. They're always a little bit behind.
Oi!
Oh, that's going to come back.
That's rude. That's rude.
Oh, so when they have both been cancelled, I'll be back with Ben for Planet of the Spiders. So thank you very much. And don't forget, and I never remember to tell you to do this, subscribe, use a little subscribe-y button. Bang the subscribe, like, subscribe, and we'll be back with you shortly.